I tend not to make a lot of videos on stuff like this, but I feel like in this certain situation where WWE kind of is in jeopardy of future events and just how the company will look overall, I feel like I probably should. And, everyone's putting their 2 cents in on what they think WWE should do and what's the right thing to do. And I'm not one to stray away from any type of controversy, so I feel like, you know what? Why not actually discuss this on the channel? What's the worst that can happen, Start my intro off. Hey, what is up, you guys? At the style, welcome back to the Tyler Williams channel. Welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about, not New Japan Pro Wrestling, not wrestling in general, but really something that's going on outside of the wrestling world that affects it tremendously, mostly WWE. And that is the murder of a journalist that works for the Washington Post, Jamal Khashoggi. I hope I said that correctly. I really don't want to butcher his name. So basically, now this guy was born in Saudi Arabia. While in Saudi Arabia, he was, I believe, an editor for a news outlet. I think it was a news channel in Saudi Arabia. He was like one of the editors, directors, producers. He was one of the behind-the-scenes workers for a major news outlet in Saudi Arabia. So he has quite a bit of history there. And he was a very outspoken journalist and didn't hold back anything when he, disclosed information. As a matter of fact, he was so outspoken in that country that he had to leave the country in fear that his life was in danger. They already, apparently Saudi Arabia banned him from Twitter and social media, and they were basically just trying to silence this guy. Not like silence him, but they were trying to silence this guy, and he felt like, okay, this could be a great danger to me. Let me go to America where I probably have a lot more freedom. So he goes to America, probably like 2017. Now it's a year later. He goes back to Saudi Arabia, I believe, to get a divorce straightened out so that way he can marry his new wife that he met in America. Goes over there, all of a sudden he disappears. And now there's alleged rumors going around that he was kidnapped, tortured, murdered, and then dismembered in Istanbul, Turkey. The news now started coming to light around earlier this week. It started to come to light, and all of a sudden, all these news outlets jumped to it because he worked for the Washington Post. That's an American outlet. So, he goes over to this country. He disappears. Technically, since he's not an American citizen. I believe it takes a few years to become an American citizen. So he wasn't an American citizen yet. But, he worked for the country. So this become a big deal because now America has light of this. The president knows about this. Everyone knows about this situation. And it all goes back to WWE because WWE has a working agreement with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They just worked a show in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the Greatest Royal Rumble in April. And now they're about to work this Crown Jewel show, which is in November 2nd, coming up in like just a few weeks. I know there's a lot of companies, American companies, that have pulled all types of sponsorships from Saudi Arabia already. So now all eyes on WWE on what they're going to do, since they're the only notable company that's, about to do a show for Saudi Arabia. They got that big show with DX versus the Brothers of Destruction. They have Brock Lesnar versus Kane. Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns versus Braun Strowman for the Universal Championship. They got this big show, and then they have the World Cup tournament happening there, which is basically just a bunch of legends. So they're trying to stack up that card with all the major talent that they can because Saudi Arabia is paying them a shitload of money for this show. I believe they paid them somewhere in the millions for their show, for their Greatest Royal Rumble show, which is why they had, such a stacked card with Undertaker versus Rusev and Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns in that 50-man Royal Rumble that we're probably never going to see again. So with all that being said, Turkey's now coming to light saying that they have potential evidence that this guy was murdered in their country, and they might come forward with it. So now, U.S. senators, the senators of the United States of America are now trying to reach out to WWE like, hey, all this is going on. This show's probably not a good idea. You probably shouldn't do it. And WWE, they came out with a statement saying that they're heavily, evaluating the situation, basically saying that, hey, we got our eye on it, but as of right now, the show must go on. They didn't say that they're still going to go forward with the show, but they didn't say that they're not going to go forward with the show, so they're very much in the middle of the whole thing. Seems like they have the ball's in their court. They can say, fuck it, and go to Saudi Arabia, make their money, and come back. Or they can say, you know what? This isn't the right thing to do. You guys got a lot of shit going on. We're not going to do the show. And they can move the event to a different venue. They could move it to a different country. I'm sure that would take a long time to do. They probably wouldn't do that until next year. Or they could just move the matches to, Survivor Series or just another pay-per-view in general. They have other options that they can do here. It's just that, do they want to turn down all that money? That's what it boils down to at the end of the day. Do they want to turn down all that money that they're going to receive? And one of the things that some people aren't talking about is that they are in a technical contract / agreement with Saudi Arabia. So if they say, hey, we're not doing the show, and they pull out when they already confirmed that they're going to be there, and I'm sure they already have everything in place with the country, they're going to get sued. Well, they can get sued. I'm sure they probably will get sued. Not to mention that in the Greatest Royal Rumble, they already had issues with Saudi Arabia when they aired that footage of Carmella, I believe, during the show. So they already had issues with the company then, with Saudi Arabia then. So now, if they just say, hey, we're dipping, I don't see why they wouldn't sue them. You know what I mean? So in this situation, WWE's kind of screwed. Either way they go, they're screwed. They're already in like a 6-foot deep hole. It's like, hey, do we want to try and crawl the hole and just get like covered up in the process, or we just want to lay in a hole and just get covered up anyway? That's kind of the situation that they're in. I feel like in any type of other company, they would just pull out and just be like, you know what, this isn't the way to go. We have moral standards. We're not going to do it. But I'm not going to sit here and say I know Vince McMahon personally. I know how he sees stuff, but we know this guy's all about money. He's in it for the money. I don't think he gives two shits about Saudi Arabia or the audience or whatever goes on over there. It's like, hey, this is my opportunity to make as much money as I can so that I can pay off all these other guys that are working for me, mostly the part-timers. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to make this bank, and then I'm going to go right back to doing what I do in the United States. That being said, I have a feeling that they're not going to pull out of it. And it's for the simple fact that they already have agreements and obligations to fill. The right thing to do, in my opinion, I think if you ask anyone else, the right thing to do is to pull out because morally it's the right thing to do. I don't think that it's really a good look on a nationwide company to be having an association with this government that condones, violence, and overall, they just don't have women's rights down packed. And for a company that's running an Evolution show, an all-women's pay-per-view later this month, and now they're going to go to a country where they're running a show where no women are allowed to, they already look like a bunch of hypocrites. So they're going to look like even bigger hypocrites if they do this show. So if the whole women's thing wasn't enough for them to to reconsider, now this is an even bigger reason, they're going to look like they are only in it for the money if they stay in this show. So just everything in general is just a bad painting for them. And it's looking even worse on their part every day that goes by when they're not saying, hey, we're not going to do this show. So, I mean, if they do, I'm sure a lot of sponsorships that they have are probably going to pull out of WWE. Even though they probably don't agree with what they're doing, they're still supporting them by accepting their money. You know what I mean? They're not like, hey, we support their decision, but you're still working with them. I think everyone pretty much is in agreement that they should pull out at this point. I'm curious to see what WWE is going to do. Whether they actually do pull out and we see what happens with them in terms of, because they've been in lawsuits before, and I believe they won just about every lawsuit that they've been in. So I'm almost certain that if they do decide that we'll just go on with the lawsuit and we'll just go to battle with them, I mean, of course they're going up against an entire government, not a company, so they might be a bit of a, that might be a hard lawsuit to get out of, a hard, kind of legal case that they might not want to dip into, which is probably part of the reason why they're not going to do it. But given their track record, I think that they might be okay. It is October 13th. We'll see what happens in the coming days. I'm sure the Evolution show is still happening. It's just, now, here's the thing. I feel like if they do the Crown Jewel show, they cannot do another show in They can't. And that's it. I feel like no matter what decision they make, That has to be the last show that they do. They can't go back to Saudi Arabia after this, because then everybody's gonna look at them in a like. People can understand if they don't do it. I mean, they won't like it, but I think people will understand if they stay with it. But if they go back to the country next year, then they're gonna be like, what the fuck? So anyway you look at it, they're screwed. But I'm really curious to see what happens. If they do put out like a tweet saying, hey, we're going, like, I'll definitely update you guys on what's happening. So I'm definitely following this case. I really don't follow a lot of this stuff, but, you know, I'm a fan of wrestling, and I'm a fan of WWE for the most part. So if they do go through with this show, I'm gonna, my outlook on them is going to just not be the most positive one. I will say that. You know, some people are saying, oh, I'm canceling my WWE Network subscription. You know, if you want to do that you can do that. I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it, or, hey, you know, they're going to, hey, whatever. If you want to protest against it, do it. I'm not really going to protest against it. That's really not my thing in these guys' situations, especially because I don't know 100% all the details. So, well, however you guys want to react to the situation is beyond you. But I'm just going to evaluate this thing and see what happens. So, yeah. Love you guys always, and I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.